this. Fix the mic. Twitch says that we're live, although it's not actually playing. That's interesting. As long as we're live, I'm happy, I guess. I'll go tell the world about it. Oh, that's not the right tab. I think I just clicked on something. I gotta learn to click on the right spots. There we are. So, streaming, game dev, gonna do camera stuff, post. And then we'll head on over here and do the same thing. And then we'll go over here, and then we'll start. Hurrah. I have been a bit of a zombie all weekend. Oh wow, I've got like chats already. You guys were already here. Elboetchy, Cody1712, and Fmelsbeer all say hi. I've never had that many people show up. Yay me. Well, unless someone wants something specific, we're going to be working on camera code today because the camera code is the worst part of this experience right now. So we're going to go and adapt the hell out of it. And there's a couple of ways that we're going to do that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to convert it over into a gimbal arm mount because that's a little bit better than just letting it rotate in space using math. It just feels more natural. So we'll put the main camera on the gimbal arm, and then what we'll do is we'll have the gimbal arm chase the ship around, and then the player can change the angle of the gimbal arm using the mouse. Now, with that in mind, we have to drop some of these scripts onto our new object, which is good because the main camera was getting a little bit heavyweight. So this should still work, believe it or not, but right now it's going to give us a very, very tiny, it's going to screw up with our camera distance. But it will work if we try to accelerate, for example. You can see that we do move. But it's obviously not in an ideal spot. So what we're going to do is trying to decide the best approach here. I think we want to have this be a pure Z offset. And then we'll start the gimbal arm slightly rotated. Now, right now, the gimbal arm isn't looking at the ship, and that's because it's not actually in the right spot. But once we've mounted it properly, it will stick to the ship control, the ship cockpit, and it should give us a decent view. You can see that it is a little bit long right now, but that's fine. The idea is sound. We definitely have a problem where it's overriding the default, so we're going to want to fix some of that stuff. But that's because this whole chase cam script is crap. We need to completely change it. It's all bad. Nothing good about it. So we're just gonna delete all of it. The only thing we're not gonna delete is the snap speed. And these two values that we actually need. All right, so what we're going to want to do is have ourselves a camera mount transform, because we might need to manipulate it, especially the z-axis coordinate. So we're going to have that assigned. Grind. Oh, it won't reload because it's got some errors. Delete everything. It's all crap. There we are. And this main camera will be the Z offset that we need. All right, this should be pretty straightforward. If you got any questions or comments or ideas on how to make better cameras, you let me know. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing this. So float zoom equals input.get axis mouse scroll wheel. If zoom does not equal 0, then what we want to do is change the z-axis coordinate of our camera mount. So we can say if zoom is greater than 0, camera mount dot local position equals new vector3, and we'll want to actually it's probably easier if we vector3 offset equals camera mount dot local position, and then we can just adjust the z-axis coordinate specifically. Offset dot z times equals 1 plus zoom. I think that zoom is actually going to be like 0.2, 0.3, but I'm not 100% sure about that. If zoom is less than 0, offset dot z divided by equals 1 plus zoom. And then we set the camera mount local position to that offset. Now we have zoom operating. Femelsbeer says, greetings. Oh wait, I think you already said that. Okay, so that works, sort of. There are a few things wrong, and I think that what's wrong is actually the ship systems here. Let's go grab the ship element that we need, which is right here. I think that we have a... I think we have this actually setting the coordinate of the camera. I think maybe not. I hope not. But let's just double check just in case. No, it's just the strafe rings. All right, so that's fine. I was a little bit worried, but if it's just the strafe rings, then it doesn't matter. Close all the others. So for some reason, oh, because this is less than 0 now, minus zoom. And it looks like zoom is a little bit too much, so we'll just go ahead and divide it by some arbitrary value. Later on, we'll go in and make that an adjustable value using a settings menu. So let's go ahead and put in a to-do settings menu hookup. Yeah, so you can see how that works just fine. Now right now we are have this issue where if we scroll the mouse, we are also changing the ship's throttle. So zooming with the mouse wheel is not something we can do while we are controlling the ship directly. What we're going to want to do is make it so that when the ship is being controlled, the camera isn't, and vice versa. And the way we can do that is we can hook a key up to turn the ship's toggle on, the camera controls on. And we'll go ahead and make that a public. Actually, we should probably put it on the control element. Ship control system, public static bool controls locked equals false. And then down here in our controls section, where we go into our update, we're going to want to say if locked, then return. Don't update our controls if something else has the helm, like a camera. Now this is a hacky way to do it. What you should do is you should have a queue, and then you should push the control element onto the queue. I was going to put that off, but you know what? We should just go ahead and do it. We'll go ahead and put in a control queue right here. Later on we can change it over to some kind of dedicated control system. But call this mono behavior. Queued controls equals new list mono behavior. Don't forget, if you're doing static variables, they don't excuse me, they don't get initialized by Unity, so you will need to manually initialize them. I know that a lot of people haven't gotten used to that. So in here, what we're going to need to do is say get if queued controls, come on, dot length, dot count, -1 equals this. So just return does not equal this. There we are. So this will say that if our locked controls, if this isn't on the top of our control stack, then the controls are locked. Maybe we should change that to in control. And it can't be static for relatively obvious reasons. So we'll just return if it's this. So when we actually get started, what we're going to want to do is add ourself to the stack. So where's our start? Start. There it is. Controls. Add this. And then here we say if in control. If we're not in control, go away. Yay! All right, so that was annoying, but now what we're going to do over here on the chase cam is if input.get mouse button 1, then we're in control. Otherwise, we want to make sure that we have some other in control method. The control key actually works fine for us because we are using WSAD QE and not the control key. So we don't have to worry about using control to go up or down. We can use it to change our camera angle. So here we can say if we're on the mouse button or we are holding down the control key. Let's just take a look and see whether or not we have any control key elements assigned. Input. Oh, I missed. As I said, I've been a zombie all weekend, so sorry if I am a little bit slow today. So control should already be linked up to something. There's left alt, left control. And it's also linked to mouse 0. We don't want left control and mouse 0 to share an axis. That would be really, really dumb. But we are going to go ahead and create a new axis, which we are going to call control. And we'll go ahead and call it camera control. And we'll go ahead and make the positive button the left control. I can't remember what it's called here. It's called sneezing. This might be why I've been a zombie all weekend. The hay fever season here in Boston has gotten out of control, and it's only going to get worse. Yeah, there it is. Looks good. So now what we have is a camera control input. So here we can say or input.get button camera control. So here we can say if we are supposed to be in control, then make sure we are in control and then continue. If we're not supposed to be in control, blah, 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 blah. So here we say if ship control, no, it's not. It's called a ship control system, right? Oh, I need to use the correct namespace using ship. If ship control system dot queued controls, and then the same thing as before, dot count -1 does not equal this, then add it. Otherwise, not in control. So here we're going to say if ship control systems.queued control.contains this, then blah.remove this, and return because we're not in control. All right, so now we should be able to, depending on whether we're holding down the right mouse button or the left control, we should be able to get, oh, I've got errors. There we go. Happy? There we are. So now we should be able to get a different kind of performance. You can see now that when I use the mouse wheel, it's not changing the ship's orientation or speed. And same with the mouse. But as soon as I stop holding control, I'm back in control of the ship. See? So it's quite simple. I can use the right mouse wheel to do the same thing, depending on whichever one you prefer. So because of that, we are well on our way towards having this camera work, but there still are a lot of things we've got to do. One of the things we have to do, regardless of whether or not we are actually in control, we have to map the camera to the location of the ship. So we just say transform.position equals, I guess it's the ship control we want to mount to. Ship control dot transform.position. Now this is a heavyweight mount the way we're pulling it right now, and we may want to have a much more lightweight mount. And you can see that we're not going along with the rotation of the ship at all. It might be better for us to actually mount ourselves on the object in question, and then use a local offset. So that's what we'll do. So here in start, we're going to say transform.set parent to our ship control .transform. And that way we will actually be following along automatically. We won't have to do a late update every frame. But we do want to have our Z offset, or rather our local offset, vary based on our speed. The faster we're going, the further behind the ship we want to get. So we're going to go ahead and say transform.local position equals rigid body, ship rigid body, dot velocity divided by 2. So we're half a second behind. And we'll want to make that negative. So that should mean that we fall behind as we accelerate, and that should give us a real sense of speed, like the ship is escaping from us. Oh, okay, so our local position is now mapped to a global velocity offset, and so that's not working because we have to turn the global offset into a local offset. So vector 3, oh, that's not the wrong location. Vector 3 local velocity equals transform dot what is it, world to local matrix, change point, invert, inverse transform point, or inverse transform direction. Yeah, inverse transform direction, ship rigid body dot velocity. Boom, like that. And then here we'll go ahead and use that. That way we won't drop below our ship. Also, I'm going to move our camera closer by default just because it's a little bit way behind the ship, you know? So that's obviously dramatically too far of a distance. We'll make it -20. That's a little too close, but you can see that at least we're in the right area now. And as we accelerate, you can see that we're still dropping down below the ship. Now that shouldn't happen because we should be getting that in local space. Oh, you know what it is? It has to be local to our parent, not to ourselves. My bad. Ship control.transform, inverse transform direction. All right, so now, much better, I can tell already. So now we've got a camera that will automatically follow the ship. Now you can see that sometimes it gets a little bit wobbly, and it looks like it's adjusting for our speed too much. We might have to put in a little bit of dampening, but the controls seem to work. It's just a matter of getting this camera to now feel right. So first things first, I think that our angle is a little bit too low, which we can fix by simply changing it. And second thing second, I want to fix the amount of distance that we have here. You want a sense of speed, but you don't want the ship to actually become so small that it's hard to see. Also, we want the upper area to be recognizable in terms of our direction. Right now, this is probably a little too high. We'll fuss with it. Yeah, 30 degrees is too high. We'll want to lock it down to maybe 20 degrees. 15 was too low, 30 was too high. There, that's better. And the reason I say it's better is because these purple vector reticles, I need them to actually line up pretty well. And if we are too far above or below the plane, then it's actually hard to tell where you're going, because you get something like this, where it's like, well, I can't actually tell precisely where we're headed because my camera isn't looking down the hole. We might have to fuss with that later, but first let's go ahead and put in some more direct controls for our mouse. So we're going to go ahead and say vector2 mouse offset equals input.getAxis, and I think that mouse X and mouse Y are separate axes. So we'll just go ahead and say float X equals input.getAxis mouse X, and float Y equals input.getAxis mouse Y. Now these are not time locked elements. These are raw, so we don't have to multiply them by the delta time. Instead, we just apply them, which makes my life a whole lot easier. So if X does not equal 0, then we want to move around the upwards axis with our camera. Now the question here is, do we want to move around the ship dot up, or do we want to move around the camera arm dot up? The difference is that if we move around the camera arm dot up, we'll end up panning from behind the ship and above to in front of the ship and below. Whereas if we work it around ship dot up, we will pan around to in front of the ship and above, i.e. looking down at the cockpit, rather than looking up at the bottom of the ship. Neither of those is particularly useful in terms of, those are extremes, and if the player is going to go to that extreme, they're looking at the ship from a functionally useless direction. They really should be looking at the ship mostly from the rear. And I'm not sure that I think that ship dot up is a better idea, is what I'm getting to say here. So we'll go ahead and rotate around the ship's axis rather than our own. Transform dot rotate. I can't remember which of these is obsolete. Is it rotate around or rotate? I think it's rotate is the correct one, the one we actually want to use. So here we have Euler angles. Here we have an axis and an angle, and we'll be able to specify it. So this will be a ship dot up. So ship control dot transform. Actually, we don't want it to be around the ship controls up, do we? Should it be the ship or the ship control? Maybe it should be the rigid body. Yeah, that's probably the best bet. Ship rigid body dot transform dot up. And then the angle, which will be x, times some value, which we'll make responsive later. And then we'll want to make it from the world space. There we are. To do, put in menu settings. And then here we'll go ahead and do the same thing for Y. Now for this, we're going to want to rotate around the right axis. And now rather than rotating around the right axis of the ship, we're going to want to rotate around the right axis of the gimbal arm, because the right axis of the ship, we might be looking at the right side of the ship, in which case that would end up pitching us in a weird direction. So that's going to be our transform.right. We could also just do local coordinates, which might actually be a little faster, but I don't think it's going to matter. It's not like that is a critical set of instructions. All right, so if I hold the right mouse key, I can now pan around the ship like this, see? Now the number one thing is it needs to feel really nice in this set of motions. When I spin around to the front of the ship, it's okay if it feels a little awkward, but in the back of the ship, it needs to feel 100% rock solid and never confuse anybody. Obviously, you'll be able to invert the X and the Y. Yeah, I think that's going to be fine. Let's go ahead and add in a couple more things. First off, the zoom is backwards. Now, second off, I want you to be able to flip your camera back to centered. That is to say, behind the ship. We're going to want to have a public float default rotation. We can actually make it a quaternion. Public quaternion. Yeah, we'll go ahead and not make it public. We'll just make it a quaternion. And here in start, we'll go ahead and say default rotation equals transform.quaternion. Transform.rotation. And that will get us our deform. And then when we want to snap to it, we'll go ahead and have a public or protected bool snap to default equals false. So here in late update, what we'll do is if either of these are true, we will say snap to default equals false, snap to default equals false. But if we down here, if snap to default is true, then we're going to want to have our rotation transform.rotation equal to quaternion.slurp or quaternion. There are a couple of different ways to do it. We could either slurp, in which case it's like a really bouncy fast and slow motion, or we could do a move towards. I think slurp is probably fine. We can change it later if we need to. Transform.rotation, default rotation, time dot delta time times 3 or 4. It doesn't really matter. Here what we're going to do is we're going to say if input dot get mouse button down 0 snap to default equals true. We're going to go ahead and have a dead zone here. What we're going to want to do is if you are moving the mouse while that key is held down, it's probably wrong. So let's go ahead and make it so that if input, or we can just say snap to default equals input.get mouse button 0. Yeah, that should do okay. Grind, grind, grind. Aboz says, what's a quaternion? So that's a really difficult question. A quaternion is basically an amount of rotation. So it's in I don't know how to explain this because it's one of those things that everybody says is really hard, and it's not really hard. It's just the amount that you've rotated in however many dimensions that you're trying to rotate, in this case 3. So when you have a transform, what you have is a location, a scale, and a rotation. So when you apply something, you can try and rotate the circle a certain. You can try to rotate the ship a certain amount, and what you do is you multiply the amount it's already rotated by the amount that you want to rotate it, and you get the original amount plus the new amount, and it's an offset, right? So when I say lerp between these two quaternions, what I'm saying is lerp between where we're rotated right now and where we were rotated when we started. But there's a lot of different ways to morph between quaternions, and right now what I'm doing is I'm changing between two quaternions. I could also multiply them together to get both at once, or I could invert them, or there's lots of different things you can do. The problem is that a lot of people don't know what quaternions are at all, and they get very, very confused because sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around exactly the order of operations and transforms and rotations and shit. Anyway, what we've got here is the camera, and when I click, it returns back to normal, as you can see. So I can hold down the right mouse, the left. I can hold down both mouse buttons and move, and it'll give me a peak that sticks back towards the original location. And I think if I can get that to work, it'll feel really nice because it'll be like just a quick little glance to see what what sort of things are going on near you. But you can see how I sort of fight it. It feels a little bit wonky. I may have to have a mouse control just for that. Of course, that works fine if we are just moving our camera and we're not worrying too much about bouncing back. So when we get this going and we're moving, you can see that as we move our camera around, it becomes unclear as to where we're headed. And I'm not really sure that that's something I can fix. Fundamentally, if you're looking at the ship from back here, it's going to be hard to tell where you're actually headed, just because you can't see that far. One of the things I could do is I could manually move our camera so that your ship is in the back edge. And if I'm going to do that, then basically this here needs to be the opposite of what it currently is. Because as you move faster, you're going to need to see further ahead. I know what it is. It's going to be something where we move further ahead based on how much we've zoomed. Vector 3 zoom value equals camera mount dot local position dot z. Abaz says, I think that's a guy with his thumb up, but he might be flipping me off. I can't tell. So the zoom value is going to just be an amount, and then we're going to want to have that offset by our ship's forward. Okay, so we're going to say ship control.forward or ship.forward? Is it ship rigid body.forward is probably the best one? Transform.forward times, and then here we can just say zoom value minus, there we are. And now that should make it so that as we zoom out, the ship occupies smaller amounts of our screen at the bottom rather than in the middle. Oh, that's not zooming out. This is zooming out. There we go. It doesn't appear to have done anything. The camera mount local position Z should be, oh, it's negative 40, idiot. Abaz says he wasn't flipping me off. So here you can see that as we zoom, the ship remains in the same spot, that is slightly off the bottom of the screen. So what we're going to do is we are going to make it not quite so aggressive. Divide it by 5, maybe. Magic numbers. Yeah, that's better. Now you can see it's a little bit rough. It's like glitching around. And that's because we're doing calculations out of order. We'll need to reorder some of these because we're changing the zoom after we check the zoom. So we're going to have to put this at the end. But basically, it's more or less correct. As we decide to accelerate and look off to the side, you can see how the ship now occupies a little bit further back, but not nearly far enough. We need it to be substantially further back. The problem is that our zoom is not as... let's see. Basically, we need to reduce our zoom. So let's add 10 to it. Maybe even 15. And then we'll divide by 2. We won't even divide. We'll just say that. Right now I'm just putting in magic numbers trying to find a good even value. But what we have here is a situation where we need to get these zoom values and stuff after we've zoomed. So here we've got this else return. We can't do this. We need to have a separate control section. So void control. There we go. That should do. And now what happens here is we've got this snap to default going. We're going to want to put that down here because that's not going to happen only when we're in control. It happens all the time. And then all of this stuff also gets put down at the bottom. There. That should be it. Yep. Good. So that should take care of our weird bobbling that we were having as we zoomed in and out. So yeah, now it's much smoother. Any bobbling you see now is because I'm actually moving the mouse wheel and not because of a frame difference. So you can see that that is the right amount of offset, but our ship is a little bit too far back. So I think we need to just add a little bit more to our camera position.z. And I think Pink Hair just joined up. I'm not 100% sure. Twitch is sometimes a little bit strange. Yeah, there. Hello, Pink Hair. We're working with cameras today, and I'm trying to get it so that when you are looking at a ship from off on the side, you should be able to see the ship better. But here you can see, as we zoom out, the camera gimbal moves in a funny way. And it doesn't actually get correctly assigned to the ship. It may be that our rigid body is not what I think it is. So here's our rigid body. And if we take a look at the axes of this rigid body, you can see that this is forward. So this should be correct. We should be moving forward, but I have a sneaking suspicion that we're moving up. Let's go ahead and have that. There it is. I'm setting the local position with a world value. So we'll go ahead and have these be separate. So here, this is just going to be negative local, and then we're going to go ahead and say transform.position plus equals zoom value. Cody17 says, it is primarily for indies. Are you talking about Quaternions? I've lost track of what you're trying to reference. Tovi says, thanks for the heads up on YouTube. I do post a lot of YouTube videos, but I don't know which one he's talking about. No, that's definitely going up. No, that's going forward. That's correct. This doesn't seem right. It's right when we're here. No, we're definitely going in the correct direction. It's just the values are all screwed up. All right, so let's go ahead and keep offsetting these values. Try to find ourselves a nice even amount. Abaz says, he answered to my comments, never heard of Itch.io, seems like a nice website. Yeah, everybody should be putting their indie games on Itch.io. There's really no reason to use a third-party host other than Itch.io. I see a lot of people posting their games to Mediafire and stuff like that, but Itch.io is so much nicer. And, I mean, unless your game includes things that break terms of service, it should work out fine. And their terms of service are pretty forgiving. You can post adult games there. You just can't, like, post illegal games. All right, so now what you can see here is I've put the ship off to the side. Previously, when we zoomed out like this and we were looking from the side, the ship was in the middle of the screen. We couldn't really see where we were going. Now that the ship is off to the side, it's a little bit easier to see how we're maneuvering and what's ahead of us. Now, you probably never want to do that, but I want it to work. I want it to feel correct if you do decide to. Now, of course, the problem is, as we zoom in, it looks like our offset is not so nice. So it looks like our offset is good when we are at a distance, but bad when we're up close. I might just put in a hard limit on the offset. Pink here's been experimenting with Cinemachine for cameras. I've been thinking about getting something like Cinemachine, but I don't understand what cameras I want, so I don't know if Cinemachine, I'd be like using it at random, and I don't think that would work out. Abaz says, third party, you would want to put your game on stuff like Steam as well, right? Well, it's the same thing as Steam, fundamentally. Itch.io, Oh, Cody was talking about Itch.io. Yeah, Itch.io is definitely a more indie-centric system, but it's basically the same sort of setup as Steam. They just have a much lower cost of entry. They don't charge you 30% of what you make. So it's really quite easy to get on Itch.io, and you should, if you have a project you're doing, you should distribute it via Itch.io for those of you who are indies. Pinkhair wouldn't use it for controlling a spaceship. Yeah, that's going to be the issue, because the spaceship has to feel really good to control, and I'm not 100% sure that I am there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and have this only trigger if our camera mount dot transform dot local position dot z is less than -20. So basically, I'm setting up our threshold at a zoom of 20, and we can change that to a magic number, from a magic number to something that gets configured later. But you can see that it still works on zooming out, but I don't think I'm convinced about zooming in. It doesn't seem to be triggering. What zoom are we at right now? -26. Okay, so 20 is actually really friggin' close. Public float zoom threshold equals 50. And then down here, what we'll do is we will have negative zoom threshold and plus the zoom threshold. And later on, we can change the zoom threshold automatically based on the size of the ship. Won't that be nice? All right, so there we are. That is how it should look. As you can see, as we zoom in past this point, we end up getting a zoom in on the control element, which is the cockpit. I'm not sure that's what I want. It might be better to get a zoom in on the ship as a whole, in which case the zoom threshold shouldn't be something that locks it out. And instead what you should have is a zoom threshold which moves you back. So what we'll do is we will say else, and then we'll have the same thing, but what we're going to want to do is divide it by a whole lot more, because otherwise it will zoom back far enough that we will see only the engine of the ship. So as we zoom in here, no, it's not moving back far enough. Maybe I have the wrong... Well, that definitely does it, but it's definitely too far back now. Magic numbers. I mean, if it's going to be divided by 2 on both sides, then there's no reason for the if. But let's go ahead and give it a shot here, because I don't think that divided by 2 is it's still too much. So we'll make it divided by 3. Pinker says maybe you should just make a null object used as a center that can be set for each ship. That's exactly what I've done. But the thing is that you don't actually want to zoom in on the center of the ship very often. You only want to do that when you're looking at close at the ship. You want, generally speaking, you're going to be like at this range here. So to be honest, I think this is okay, except for one small issue. As you can see, it's not following the ship's rotation anymore. It used to, and now it's not. Aha! See, I set this as the rotation, and I should have set this as the local rotation. Idiot. So here, when we do our snap, which is here, it's going to be local rotation. Peter Nerlich says hi. Hello! I seem to have a lot of viewers today, which is almost a shame because I've been such a zombie the whole weekend, and there's actually a festival happening, and the more I stream, the more I miss the festival. That's okay, though. So what are we trying to accomplish here? We would like to test out... oh, the snapping. Well, that definitely didn't work. Why the hell did you zoom... This is clearly not the right zoom. Oh, this is bizarre. So let's take a look here. Default rotation equals our transform dot local rotation. And then down here when we snap, transform dot local rotation equals a slurp between our local rotation and the default rotation. Why doesn't this result in the same thing, in the same angle? Oh, is it because we're not... I know what the problem is. Idiot. I was taking that before I set the parent to the ship, so... It was getting me the local rotation of, like, the universe, which isn't really very useful. So now if I were to go over here, I can take a look at the ship, I can zoom in, I can do stuff, I can click, and it takes me back. Yeah, nice. All right. And then I can change my view with just a right click. And now the question is, does this actually feel right? Let's go over into a cramped space and see. Because really, when we need the camera most is when we're in someplace cramped. I think that our ship is a little bit... Is this the velocity? This might be the velocity that's causing this issue. I might have to change our velocity offset. It doesn't seem to be very good. So when we go into a cramped space like this, the problem is trying to figure out where you are, how close you are to the walls and stuff like that. Now this particular ship is really a bit wrong just because it's totally placeholder. It doesn't even have the proper shaders attached, so I don't get the warning that I normally get about how close the walls are. But even without that, we should be able to test some of these values. Yeah, so we can move this camera around. So now I've just realized that I really want to be able to move the camera and strafe. So what we're going to do is we are going to let the ship continue to be controlled while we are holding down the camera control button. So down here in the update, we do this. If in control, return! Ah! What we're going to do instead is we're going to put this down in this area. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say if controls, if queued controls dot includes dot contains this. So if we're not even in the list of queued controls, then just skip us, because that means that we're probably an AI ship. Otherwise, allow us to strafe. However, even if we are strafing, if the mouse wheel is, if the mouse controller, if the mouse button is being held so that the camera is being controlled, then just stop. So basically, if we're adjusting the camera, don't adjust our pitch or our acceleration. Only allow us to strafe. And that should allow us to do some nice strafe maneuvers. Let's go ahead and go to something that actually responds to our speed a little bit. I need to readjust this ball that we've got going here. So if I hold this, yeah, there we are. See, now I can control the ship by strafing and look around with our mouse. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I like that. Go! I might make it even snappier. I might make the ship acceleration even snappier. Nice. Nice! Okay, but this is not nice. Okay, so the velocity is not working right. It's making it too hard to see what's going on, so we're going to go ahead and just delete that. We're going to nix the velocity offset entirely. So where is our velocity? Here it is. We're going to just comment this part out, and then this will be an equals rather than a plus equals. Now we won't have to worry about our ship getting too far ahead of us. Peter Nerlich stopped in to say hi. I think I read that like an hour ago, and I just didn't realize it. So, well, that was odd. Huh. Oh, there's the problem. Camera mount at local position. No. This should be right. Oh, it needs to be the... So here we're setting the position. We need our local position to just be 0. All right. Better. That's something we can optimize later, I think, because I don't think I left it very well optimized. So the idea is that even at great speed, we should still be able to control the ship pretty well. I want to shoot for that loop there. Come on, don't break, don't break, don't break. Yeah, I made it. Oh no, shit. Yeah. I ran into the debris field, but I missed all the stuff I was worried about. So I'm not going to be able to strafe that far, I'm afraid. Let's go check out the engine. This is definitely far more usable than it was a second ago, except for, of course, the invisible debug colliders that I've got around those debris fields, which we'll work on later. There's our engine. Let's check it out. Yeah, this feels pretty good, guys. I think that this is definitely turning out okay. This camera is so much better than what it was before. The only thing I want to fix is this snap. You see that? That's a little bit too annoying. So what I'm going to do is, if the mouse button is being held, I'm going to snap in a different way. First off, I want to make it so that... yeah, I guess that's probably the only thing I need to do. I'm going to make it so that when we are snapping, we slurp if the mouse wheel is not being held down, and then we do something slower if the mouse wheel is. So if input.get mouse button 0, then do something else, do something fast. So instead of the quaternion.slurp, we could do a quaternion.slurp still, but I think we have a quaternion.add towards, rotate towards. So what we're going to do is we're going to just do a rotate towards at a much slower speed. And this will be like 4 degrees a second is obviously too slow. How about 15 degrees a second? Yeah, okay, so this does return the rotated and not the amount rotated. All right, good. So I don't have to multiply anything. I just set it equal. All right, so what we're going to test now is when I'm doing this kind of peak. Yeah, now see how much smoother that is? It used to be like this really grotesque pop, but now I can take a look around and it will just fade back towards the normal view. And if you're wondering why that matters, it's because it allows me to look around as we are moving and not lose track of what the forward axis is. Oh no. Crash. Gotta be more careful, Craig. Zoom. I can see how this could be useful. Let's go ahead and stop in the middle of one of these areas, and then we'll get to really see whether or not this is a useful approach. Grind, 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 grind. Wow, you're so slow to stop. Now back up. Beep, beep, beep. Yeah, I can already tell this is going to be way better. The only problem is the throttle is kind of touchy in situations like this. So we're going to have to be a little bit careful. Yeah, the throttle doesn't feel very natural at these low speeds. I'll have to think about a better method of control for the throttle. Also, I found out that if you record GIFs with the GIF controller I've got, it doesn't include any of the FX. How interesting is that? So last time I recorded a bunch of GIFs of my new engine effects, and they didn't show up at all. Yeah, great. So if any of you have a favorite GIF in Unity GIF system, let me know, because this one doesn't actually capture the visuals that I needed to capture. Not if I plan to use that engine effect. All right, so we're going to remove the recorder. HX volumetric. That was turned off, but I was seeing it fine. I guess it doesn't matter whether it's off or on. Fascinating. Oh yeah, a lot of you didn't actually come by when I was working on these engines. What do you think of this new engine effect? Do you like it? You can't see the particles coming out of the lesser jets, though. You could last week. What did I break? Well, we'll fix that in a minute. Peter Nerlich says, he says that my mic is falling down. Do you keep a global up to make orientation easier, or is it arbitrary rolling? Arbitrary rolling isn't implemented yet, but there's room for it. The problem is I actually don't have the right control system quite yet for the rotation of the ring. It's close, but I need to revamp it. It hasn't been annoying enough that I've cared, but I'll clearly need to fix that in the long run. So the result is there is no universal up. The only up that matters is the arrow on these rings in front of you. So if you look at the screen, that up on those 3 pink rings, that's our up. And that's the only up that matters. Tovi says, I actually love the volumetric lighting. Is it a custom shader, or are you doing something with particles? I'm using a plugin called HX Volumetric Lights, and they're pretty good. They're very fast, but the problem with them is that they don't get picked up by my GIF encoder, so I can't take cute little gameplay GIFs anymore. Very sad. But what I can do is try to fix the lights that are not showing up right now. And I think the way to do that is to stop using bounding volumes that are per object and use one giant ship bounding volume. So we'll create a cube, and we'll call this volumetric lighting area. We'll add in an HX volumetric lighting volume. And we'll go ahead and set this up properly. I think that was at 1 or something similar. And we'll just delete all of the volumetric lighting density volumes. That's not how you spell density. There. We'll delete all of the volumes that we have right now. I'll just remove them entirely. Because you can see how many bounds we've got. There's too many bounds here. I think it's screwing us up, so we'll remove them all. Oh, I removed the wrong thing. Undo. This is what we need to remove. These are all actual lights. We don't need to remove them. All right, so that should reduce the number of volumetric lights. Reduce the amount of volumetric computation that's required. See, the volumetric lighting bounds are no longer the volumetric lighting bounds. They're just a container. That's fine. This volumetric lighting area is the ship-wide volumetric light area. And it's going to need to be maybe there, like that. Boom. More or less. Yeah, that's still fine. But as you can see, we're not seeing any lights coming off of the sideways thrusters. Now, you can tell if you look close, there's a little bit of a glow, I think, right there. Yeah, you see that glow? So the volumetric light is firing, but it's not actually producing any fog. So if we take a look, the light is currently set up properly. That's not the right light. There it is. There's the light volume. Obviously, it's empty. The volumetric spotlights are both firing. Yeah, they're both firing. They're both on. They both have a density, intensity of 2, intensity of 2. Is it just that their intensity is too low? I can't see them. What the heck's going on? Monk of Time says, hey, what did I miss? I implemented a camera system, so you missed the heart of this episode. Right now I'm just trying to fix the volumetric lighting that's coming out from these side elements. Because for some reason I can't see them. I can see the ones from the... Oh! I'm just an idiot. I'm looking at the wrong camera. Okay, so the problem is that their intensity is just set too low. So let's go ahead and fix that, which we can do simply by selecting all 3 light volumes and changing their intensity multiple to 8. Now, what I did before is I had an intensity multiple that was lower, and I was using a higher density fog, but I don't want to use distinct fogs for every light because that creates crisp edges where those fog volumes overlap, and it was looking really weird. But I think I need to have a higher fog volume than this. Can I increase the responsiveness on the camera, or do I need to increase the... Let's go ahead and set the overall ship fog to 2 instead of just 1. The problem is I don't want to accidentally make these engines look like crap. So if we zoom out here, you can see that the engines don't look too bad. If I were to take the volume any higher, they probably would. But we're really barely able to see the lights of the... I guess they're not invisible, but they're really not very bright. And I'm not sure why. They really should show quite clearly. Let's go ahead and try and find how they look right now. We'll do that by moving the camera so that we can just see it here on the scene. There we are. Just move this global view. That should work. Perfect. So if we take these volumetric lights, we should be able to see them, and you can't. Why can't you see them? Extra density actually prevents them from being seen. Oh, that's fascinating. Is that because it makes the light have a heavier push, or what? Can I increase the light density here? No. I can decrease it. Oh, okay. That's definitely better, although it's pretty sharp. I wonder if I can have some extra fall off. Extinction. Do I want to have a... He's telling me that I can have I can modify them per light, but if I do, they won't be physically accurate. I think that's okay. I can live with a physically inaccurate light. But you know what? I think that these all need to be a longer range light. Like say 10. And then we'll just hit apply. And let's see how it looks in game. Tovi says, what about increasing the intensity? Well, the greatest flaw in my mind of this particular lighting system is that it has a maximum intensity of 8 per light. But you can see that we can now clearly see the lights. We might want to modify them some more, change how that looks a little bit. But as long as I can see them, I'm happy with it now. Can I get through? It's going to be tight. No, I'm going to crash. Yeah. So I think that what we're going to want to do is have a ramp up on those lights. So that's what we're going to go ahead and program in now. The various thrusters we've got. Here we are. Thruster component. Right now, they tell the lights how much throttle they have. They just have an on throttle changed, as you can see. What we're going to want to do is we're going to have a throttle lerp, a throttle reporting lerp. So public float throttle reporting lerp. We're going to go ahead and make that default to 5. Tooltip at 0 throttle reports accurately, otherwise lerps by time. Float lerped reporting throttle. Throttle report equals 0. Yeah, there we are. And so what we're going to do is down here where we actually start to do our direct on throttle changed. Here it is. We're going to want to actually have this happen a different way. This isn't the right way to do it. So we're going to put it into someplace else. We can put it into the fixed update. I think that's probably the best place for it. As long as there's no returns on top of us, and there aren't. Okay, so if throttle reporting lerp equals 0, then we say, first we say if throttle equals reported throttle, does not equal reported throttle, then we're going to want to do this lerping here. Throttle report equals throttle. So basically, if our lerping is turned off, then our throttle report will always match our throttle. Otherwise, we're going to want to have it lerp towards our throttle. So throttle report equals mathf.lerp. Yeah, I guess lerping is fine. There are lots of other ways to do it, but I think lerping is fine. Throttle report, throttle time.delta time times throttle reporting lerp. If mathf.abs throttle report minus throttle is less than 0.05 f, then throttle report equals throttle. There we go. The only problem I have with that is it runs a frame slow. And I'm not 100% sure I like that. But that should be okay. I don't think that anyone will notice. All right, so when the throttle hits 0, you see how they fade away? That's actually the opposite of what I want. So this here is only going to be if the throttle is greater than the throttle report. So if the throttle is less than the throttle report, or the throttle reporting lerp is 0, then do that thing. So basically, if our throttle is increasing, I don't want it to immediately spring into full-fledged action. I want it to be a slow ramp up. Yeah, like that. But once it fades, it can fade as fast or as slow as it wants. Yeah, like that. That's all fine. Because we have that heating value, and that's what we get on the fade side. So I think that our reporting lerp on these maneuvering thrusters is too high. So we're going to go ahead and bring our reporting lerp from 5 down to 2. And then we'll save that. On our main engines, we're going to want to have a lerping of 0, I think, because we're going to want to I'm going to want to have an instant pop into life on them, or else it'll feel sluggish. All right, let's see how this feels. Oh, there we go. That's more like it. Yeah, I think that's okay. The visuals need a little bit of work. I might have to use particle effects for those particular systems. I'll have to find noise. That's the problem. There's no noise. Okay. So if I were to take these guys, make them 10, 10, like so, and then I can add noise, of course. So noise enabled. Thank you. And if we take a look at our game and we tell it to tell us about the noise enabled on these, it's just on one set of lights. Is it the lower set or the upper set? It's on the upper set. Why can't I see them? I have a feeling that they'll show up fine once I turn it on, but it's strange that I can't see it, because I could see it last time when I tried it on the engine. Oh, there we are. Interesting. Let's just take a look. Tovi says you could couple the camera's FOV to your main acceleration. You know, that's not half bad an idea. The question is whether or not it would make people sick. Okay, so it looks like our lighting noise isn't really keeping up. Yeah, this should have the right lighting noise. Do I need to change the scale to maybe 222? What happens if we try that? Turn on the noise contrast at a high level. I'll try that FOV thing as soon as I can get these noise systems to work. Why can't I see the noise? I see like a little bit of chatter up here. Is it because the light is so intense that it's blurring out all the noise? That's actually not unlikely. Because, I mean, clearly there's some noise-like effects there. If I turn off the noise enabled... No, those are still there, so that's not noise. Is it? Did I go the wrong way with the noise scale? I can't seem to get it to have any noise. This is kind of interesting. I didn't have this problem with the main engines. The only thing I can think of is because this ship has... I've really aggressively tuned it so that I can see them. It might very well be that this just doesn't have the capacity to show noise anymore because it's been tweaked to hell and back, and it's no longer showing. I can see like some very subtle banding. Okay, so the noise contrast only goes up to 4. The noise scale... I don't think this is making any difference at all. No, it's not making a tiniest bit of difference. We'll deal with it later. I can't get the noise to work for some reason, and that's too bad, because that would actually make it look correct. It's a real annoyance that I can't get that to work. Well, I'll figure it out some other time. For now, we'll just hit apply. All right, so the idea of an FOV that shifts with your acceleration is an interesting one. It might actually solve some of our issues, but it might also make things completely unplayable. Let's find out. So for that, what we're going to need to do is store the camera here in the chase cam. Right now we store the camera mount, but not the camera. There we are. And then we're going to want to have it as a bool, so it can be disabled. Public bool FOV scaling equals true. And then down here in our late update, at the end, we're going to want to change our FOV based on our velocity. So float velocity equals rigid body, ship rigid body dot velocity dot magnitude. And then we're going to go ahead and say that our FOV is based on that. So we'll say camera dot, oh, we have to say new cam. Yeah. Camera.fov equals velocity plus 30. We'll just try it out, try it on for scale. Oh, I forgot to set the camera, of course. It's like, why didn't that work? Gotta plug things in or they don't work, as I've said hundreds of times. There we go. That might be a little bit too heavy. Let's go ahead and change this a little bit. So go ahead and call it 60, and we'll divide the velocity by a large amount. We may also square root the velocity. That would probably work even better. Crunk. So this is a fairly mild FOV shift, and I don't know whether people will like it or not. Some people are extremely particular about their FOVs. And this one is quite a mild change. Let's go ahead and square it, or square root it. mathf.square root. We're also going to go ahead and change it to being called FOV scaling so that it doesn't look stupid. Oh, I need to... if FOV scaling... There we go. Now, right now, the camera is set to an FOV of 60. Okay. We can change that later. I do like that little, like, woo it gives you right when you start moving. I may make it so that there's like a 5-degree pop in just the first 1 meter per second. Okay, so if we can get ourselves up to speed. Or maybe the FOV should go the other direction. Do you think we should get more of a tunnel vision as we go faster, or vice versa? If velocity... Oh, I'm already doing it, because if the velocity is less than 1 but greater than 0, it scales towards 1. So that's fine. Perhaps you should tie it to acceleration instead, so that when you're going full speed, it goes back down. That's not a bad call, except it's actually a little hard to tell what the actual acceleration is. Dotbow says, weird that the ship is so static at the center of the screen. It's interesting that you should say that, Dotbow, because it's not. I've gone to great lengths to make it feel like it's centered, but it's not. What I can do here is multiply this by 2. Yeah, that initial snap feels really good, because then you can tell that you're moving. So when I zoom out, you can see the ship is not in the center of the screen, and when I zoom in, it's also not in the center of the screen. What I have done is I've made it so that it no longer responds to velocity like it used to. And that might be something that now I can fix, because I've taken out some of the other values. The problem is, I think I need to make it go the opposite direction of what I was doing before. So if I turn this back on, I can just do it like this. We can also go ahead and, I guess square rooting a whole vector 3 is quite difficult, so I guess we won't do that. Let's see how this feels. Yeah, I was just pushing the ship the wrong way because I'd forgotten how we were doing it. All right, now it actually feels like we are starting to move fast. Obviously, this is too much push. We'll want to reduce that. But, oh, that was pretty epic feeling. The idea is there. Let's go ahead and have this be divided by 10. I'm tempted to normalize it and then multiply it by the square root of its magnitude. Or maybe the square? No, it's fine. It's fine the way it is. All right, so everybody pay attention. When you start to accelerate, it feels like this. Now, a lot of this stuff will be adjustable. For example, if you don't want that FOV blurb, you'll be able to turn that off. But I want it to feel good as a default. Oh, once again, I screwed it up. It's pitched just to make it hard on myself. As we turn around, whoa! I crashed my butt into something I couldn't see. Yep, I sure did. Can I squeak through this? I can. Look at that. Now, because this thing isn't using the right hull type, I can't actually tell how far away it is because I don't get that yellow blob. I need to polish that yellow blob anyway. Yeah, look, we're way too close now. I can't see the collider. All right, let's go ahead and change the hull type for that because it's just not the right shader. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to actually go check the shader up here and just change it out. The ship Greebler is the problem. It can't be the ship Greebler. It needs to be the responder. So what we're going to want to do is go over to materials and drop in some prox hull. And prox highlight, but there is no prox highlight. There's only prox interior. Well, let's go ahead and create a prox highlight. And the prox highlight will be blue. Like that. Perfect. So we clicked on this thing again, and we changed it over to Prox Highlight. Peter Nerlich says, if it's used, the acceleration for the FOV would actually feel like the G-forces. All right, I'm going to try and figure out a way to properly set that up. Just give me a second to finish replacing these materials. Okay, so they don't share materials in the same slot order. That is a shame. That's fine. I'll do it one by one. Nothing like some busy work to make the stream feel good, right? Highlight, Prox Highlight. And we'll leave the functional electronics as they are. Prox Hull. Prox Highlight. Prox Hull. Prox Highlight. Prox Hull. Prox Highlight. Prox Hull. Prox Interior. Prox Highlight. Prox Hull. Prox Highlight. And the last mesh. Prox Highlight, Prox Hull, Prox Interior. Up. Prox Interior. There we are. Now I can't remember whether or not the little gap in the center is actually its own mesh. No, it doesn't look like it is. That's fine then. Good. All right, so Dapao says there's no camera shift when ship direction changes. I'm not sure. Do you mean that it should skew so that when you turn, the camera feels like it has some sloppiness to it? That might be worthwhile too. Let's go ahead and get that FOV a little bit more online right now. Protected vector 3 last velocity. So here in the late update, we'll go ahead and say float. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. Float a cell equals ship rigid body dot velocity minus last velocity dot magnitude. There we go. And then we say last velocity equals a cell, or equals ship velocity. There we are. Perfect. We can also use this to save ourselves a little bit of this ship rigid body velocity checking, because I know we do that a couple of times here. Let's find it here. Ship rigid body dot transform. Here it is. Ship rigid body dot velocity. Boom. And ship rigid body dot. Oh, I guess I only did it once. Okay, that's fine. So here in our FOV scaling, we're gonna, instead of this last velocity dot magnitude, we're going to go ahead and just use the SL. That's too many C's. There we are. Let's go ahead and try it on for size and see how it feels. Whoa. Got a rave. All right, so the reason for that is because the physics are updating at a different rate than the late update is, with the result being that we have a situation where sometimes the physics will change and sometimes it won't. So it'll pop between 0 and whatever it is now. The only way to really fix that is to hook it up to the same fixed update that's happening elsewhere. Void fixed update. Oh. I'll call it something more specific like G-forces. Yeah. What is going on here? I don't get any feeling from this that it's working like it's supposed to. It feels like it's working wrong here. Um, um, well, I certainly felt it. As the velocity increases, the camera moves forward. But when the velocity peaks out, it should... Do we get the snap feeling as it reduces back down to a... Yeah, so it does pop. It's just not very much. Let's go ahead and lerp it. So last velocity will equal mathf.lerp. No, vector3.lerp. There we are. But we also have an issue where we are moving too far forward with our velocity checks. So we're going to go ahead and divide this by more magic numbers, just to make sure that we don't accidentally move too far ahead of the ship. Let's see. The camera field of view, let's multiply it by 20. Because the ship velocity changes frame to frame are quite small. So we need to multiply them by a large number. Oh, that might be a little too large of a number. All right, so not by 20. By 10 is probably fine now that we're lerping. Let's lerp a little bit more slowly. That feels really strange. I don't think that's going to work out for us. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that makes me kind of sick, so we're going to not have to do that. I can still make it so that it reacts to the velocity, but it looks like the acceleration is going to end up making us barf. So... All right, so let's think here. The other thing that we were thinking about doing is creating kind of a washy effect as the ship turns and the camera doesn't quite turn with it. So this, as you can see, the camera feels very stiff. Now in the past, what I'd done is I'd hooked the camera up to the ship, as you can see here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and unhook it from the ship right after we've taken, well, how should I do this? Do I want to introduce another joint in this gimbal? That might be the easiest way to do it. Tovi, if I could figure out how to make it work well, I would. But short of lerping it so much that it barely responds, it really judders you're accelerating the ship a lot. And it's clear that it will end up changing constantly. So rather than being something that feels great, it's something that feels obnoxious. And that might be realistic. I mean, if you've ever tried to drive a sports car real fast and around a track, you know that that's how it feels when you're moving around the corners. You actually do get quite a bit of pressure, but it just doesn't feel right for this game. Now, there's that crummy piloting I'll need to fix. I'm not convinced about the FOV scaling just yet. I like the initial punch, but after that it seems to really feel weird. Maybe I'm just not on top of the game today because I'm a little bit under the weather. Wow, that was not how I intended to pilot that. Whatever. Okay. The problem is we're going almost vertical, and that's the one thing that my current piloting system doesn't understand. So right now we're testing to see whether or not the nav markers will show up. There they are. Oh, shit. Crash. Didn't realize that side was sealed. All right, so that's all well and good. I can work more with the FOV stuff later to try and make it feel better. I think the idea is good. I just need to polish my concept of it in my head. Tovi says it was at least entertaining to watch me try and develop it. That's why I'm here. All right, so the last thing is the kind of washy feel that we can get. I think we're going to need to include another gimbal in order to have that happen. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. So we'll create an empty in here, which we will call the slop gimbal. And then the main camera will be mounted inside of the slop gimbal. Over here in the chase cam, we're going to need a transform for the slop gimbal. There we go. And obviously we're going to need to set that up. Now the point of the slop gimbal will be to follow behind. So in order to do that, we're going to need to take advantage of some caching. We're going to need to do some caching. So protected quaternion last rotation. I guess we'll just go ahead and set it to identity. No, we'll go ahead and set it here. There we are. So here in last update at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to do some camera movement if our new rotation is not the same as our last rotation. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to get the difference between the last angle and our current angle. So quaternion delta equals quaternion dot angle between from to rotation. And then we'll just do last rotation and transform.rotation. And that's the global rotation, not the local rotation. And that's all there is. And then what we can do is we can then set the last rotation equal to, well, we'll lerp it. We'll lerp it. Last rotation equals quaternion.slurp. Last rotation, transform.rotation, and time.delta time times 3. Magic numbers. And then what we'll do is we will apply that last rotation to our, we'll apply that rotation delta to our slop. So slop gimbal dot rotation equals delta. Might be local rotation. Let's go ahead and try it. This, however, is a real heavy delta. Cannot convert. Hold on. From to rotation. Oh, these are two vectors. I need the ones that are deltas. I mean, quaternions, rather. Rotate towards. Here it is. Rotates a rotation from towards to? No, I need the opposite of that. Do you not have one for me? You jerks. Last rotation dot. Creates a rotation which rotates from direction to direction. Creates a rotation? No, that's not right. You're all jerks. You're not giving me what I need. Quaternion dot Euler? No, that's not right. So the problem is that this actually changes the from rotation to try and reach the to rotation. And if we're going to do that, then I mean we might as well just invert it. All right, so quaternion delta equals last rotation dot quaternion dot invert last rotation times transform dot rotation. I actually don't know whether or not that's going to work, but let's try it out. Well, it certainly vibrates. I think this is how I do it. If I invert it and then multiply by it, I should get the difference between the two. Right? Do I have to multiply them in the opposite order? And this is why people think quaternions are hard, because they kind of do whatever the hell they want. You have to know how they work, and I've forgotten how to get this value. I know this isn't it, though. The fact that we're vibrating is more than enough. It might be easiest... What am I doing? It might be easiest just to have a vector offset, now that I'm thinking about it. We're not trying to control how we're rotated. That'll make us barf. Vector 3, last position. There we are. So down here, when we're trying to rotate it, we're not going to be looking for our position, our rotation, going to be looking for our position. So vector 3 offset equals transform.position minus last position. And then last position equals transform.position. And then what we do here is we want to set our local position equal to the last equal to the offset times, divided by 2. But this will be setting our local position to a global coordinate. So we need to actually set the offset equal to the local offset. And the way we can do that is by doing transform.inverse transform point or inverse transform direction. And there, that's what we need to do. And that, the name last rotation, of course it doesn't. Where's the last rotation being set? Oh, last rotation equals default rotation. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the right object here. It's here in our camera. Oh, the camera's been mounted. There it is. There's the slop gimbal. And now if we take a look at the slop gimbal's values, you can see that they are changing, but they're not changing very hard. And it gives us this vibration effect. And the reason it's giving us that vibration effect is because we're not locked into viewing the center. So when we offset, it's very sensitive to the offset. But I think the problem here is that we should be tracking the last position of the camera, not the last position of the slop mount. Sorry, the camera mount is where we care about, not the root, because the camera mount is what actually gets set. So as we rotate, the camera mount really swings, and that's what we want to take into account. It's really wobbly. Why is it so wobbly? Last position equals vector3.lerp. Last position camera mount.position, and then t, which is like time.delta time times something. Well, my brain just turned off. I don't know if you could hear that or not. It was like, but what we're going to do is we're going to try a little bit more, and then we're going to let it rest for the night. So we're coming up on the end of the stream. If you have any questions or anything, let me know. I got another 10 minutes or so before my voice gives out, and my brain already did. So we're going to set this stop gimbal position equal to the transform.position plus the offset, and we're not going to get the transformed offset. And then here, we're actually going to lerp this as well. Vector3.lerp slop gimbal.position transform.position plus offset time.delta time times 2. I don't know if we need to lerp the last position. I guess we probably don't. It really doesn't slot very hard, does it? Oh, that didn't work. Undo. Well, it looks like we do need to lerp here, because otherwise we're not going to get any slopping done. The idea here is that as we turn the ship, we should get... that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's definitely going the wrong direction, but it's what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and give it a minus offset instead of a plus offset. Yeah, that's probably more or less what everyone had in mind when they were talking about this. I think it was .bao who was mostly obsessed with it. But now it's got a little bit of slop to it, right? And that's what you wanted, right? We might need to disable that slop if the player is controlling the camera. So if we take a look here, if the player is in direct control of the camera, then we're going to want to have that be properly slopped. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just check again. Bool control equals that. And then down here, what we'll do is we'll say, if we're in control, then the slop gimbal.local position equals vector3.0. Else do this stuff. So if we are controlling the camera, we don't need it doing weird shit, basically. So you can see that as we control the camera, it remains nice and sharply locked in, right? And that's fine, because we won't be turning the ship while we're controlling the camera. The two functions use the same inputs, so it's impossible to do them both at the same time. And if we actually accelerate, like using default camera views, we get a nice sort of sloppy follow. I think that actually feels pretty decent. Now, if only I had a GIF system that could capture the new engine effects. I think that we are letting the velocity of our ship take too much precedence, and I think the reason for that is because we are now applying it twice. This slop is exactly the same as our velocity motion, but in the opposite direction. The slop should really only be offset on the scale of not the direction of the acceleration of the ship. So offset, so vector3 dot, and we have a bunch of things we can do to flatten the vector3 down onto a surface, project onto plane, as it were. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this offset to flatten down to the ship's velocity plane. So ship rigid body dot velocity, and then offset equals that. Don't lag behind the ship when accelerating. There's another function for that. All right, let's see whether this works. It should. Get ourselves some acceleration here. Yeah, you can feel now we're not lagging behind the ship like we were before. But if we suddenly turn, shoom, we get that sloppy feeling. Good, good, it works. All right, everybody, we did a lot, and I'm really glad at how much we did. But I think that is going to be it for the day. I have an hour of festival left, so I'm going to go try and see whether there's anything worth seeing. And I will see you on Wednesday if you care to drop by. Thanks for keeping me company. You were extremely helpful today in thinking about cool things I could do with my camera. I wouldn't have thought of half of these without you. I'll see you around, and where's the stop button? There it is.